Can I just go to a completely different issue that relating to you and the Deputy Director? Are either or both of you currently endorsed to fly commercial aircraft?
Endorsed or
endorsed to fly commercial aircraft?
Well, the licence endorsements are perpetual for the life of the licence. So I'm endorsed to fly the 747-400, the Boeing 777 series, the Airbus A330, Airbus A340, 300, 600, TriStar, and the classic 747. Those endorsements...
It's going better while the TriStar.
The mighty TriStar, I think it is. Those endorsements are permanent on the licence, but to exercise the privileges of the licence, you need to meet the whatever the currency requirements are,
right.
Instrument rating, etc., or by
and
annual flight check, and you need a medical.
And similarly for you, Mr. Farquharson?
Terry Farquharson, Deputy Director of Aviation Safety. Yes, Senator. Although I had a medical issue in the mid-90s, I could regain a medical if I wished, but I can't do this job and fly as well.
No, I understand. But in terms of the endorsements, to upgrade to be current, you need to presumably undertake some further testing or training. Is that right? Or
Well, most of the aircraft that we're talking about, large aircraft,
yeah.
Are operated by airlines, which of course have a check and training organisation, a CAR 217.
Yeah.
And their requirements for the training, which we would look at and accept, would be stipulated there, what one has to do if you've been 3 months without flying, 6 months without flying, or whatever.
Right.
So each individual operator of those aircraft type would have a manual which conforms with CAR 217 required for check and training organisations.
But you haven't had cause to have your to have ongoing training or to be current as a pilot.
I don't exercise the privileges of my licence, Senator, but for me to do that, pick one of those, say the 777, I'd have to go to somewhere and hire a simulator and then presumably for what when I'm not flying the aeroplane, it's so economically not a good idea.
No, but it doesn't enhance your role as director to be current on those aircraft, in your view.
Well, it only comes down to dollars, Senator. It would certainly enhance my role if someone would perhaps pay for the cost of my 777 endorsement or renewal, but in these day and ages, Senator, I think it's seen as a bit of a
even though it might, so just to clarify this, even though it may enhance the role of yourself or others in CASA to be current on endorsement, it's not the sort of thing that CASA would pay for.
Well, it depends on the extent of it, Senator. Obviously, there is no flying training budget as such allocated to my position number, nor to Mr. Farquharson's position number, but of course there is with our inspectorate. Anything's possible. We could put that in the position description and put in some funding to that, provided what the funds are, and I don't think it's a bad idea. The FAA administrator does fly. Admittedly, I don't think he flies particularly large aircraft, but they also have an aircraft fleet themselves. It would certainly be an advantage, but it's time and money, I think, is the current situation.
And look, maybe I notice if you could just, so I can see the sense of having some CASA officers being current, and if you could just on notice let me know what budget's been allocated and what sort of currency there is. And I take it that CASA doesn't have its own fleet of aircraft like the FAA.
No, Senator, and I believe some of the FAA aircraft are confiscated from drug enforcement action, so they must probably have a better supply of airframes than perhaps we have with no insult intended.
Perhaps you should talk to the AFP about that.
Yeah, we can give you those budget numbers now if you'd like, Senator, on flying training.
Sure.
Okay, I'll just ask Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Jordan, to come to the table.
Yeah. So basically, neither yourself nor the director have got any current have had any training for current endorsements of aircraft.
Not on large aeroplanes, Senator. I've flown light aeroplanes of recent times, but not the commercial operations.
No, I understand.
Craig Jordan, Chief Financial Officer. Senator, in response to your question, our fine training budget for the previous financial year, we actually spent $2.3 million. And
that was spent for how many personnel within CASA to be trained?
Senator, I don't have that information with me at the moment. I'd have to take that on notice. But overall, the bucket of money we spent was $2.3 million.
Right.
Purely for our technical staff.
And so that they can have So I take it the rationale, well, perhaps through to Mr McCormick, the rationale of that is that if you have some of your officers who are currently rated, in other words, can get behind the cockpit of an aircraft to flight, that they'd have a degree of knowledge and currency that would be useful for their work.
Oh, every aircraft, Senator, above 5,700 kilograms, we have an FOI who is endorsed on that aircraft.
Yeah. Which means they've got to be
flight
current.
operations inspectors.
Which means they ought to be current in terms of...
They should, except that it hasn't been the practice in Australia, to my knowledge, certainly not in my time, for flight operations inspectors to say fly with Qantas on-line flying duties. We do have them in the simulator. They go through the recurrent training program, etc. Now, that principle of not flying with the airline, that's not necessarily the same in other jurisdictions, and I have worked in jurisdictions where the flight operations inspectors did fly on the line with the operating cruiser, but that has not been the practice in Australia.
But there's an important principle, particularly in terms of safety management systems and the like, that you have FOIs who basically are current, who've had even just a simulated training.
We do that, Senator. We do have them in the simulator training, and they do, of course, observe line flights as well.
But that's FOIs. That's not done at a director or deputy director or associate director level. No, that clarifies that, and that makes good sense. Maybe just to get an idea of how many, on notice, how many flight office FOIs would have been trained for that 2.3 million, and I'll be happy with that.
We have spent quite a bit of effort in getting that flying training to our inspectorate. In some years past, we chronically underspent the flying training allocation, but we've worked very hard on it the last few years.
Because they would have a level of knowledge, having that currency, wouldn't they? That would be of use.
Oh yes, we have some of our flight operations inspectors are very experienced on the airplanes they're flying, even with 747s and the like. At that larger end of town. Now, below 5,700 kilograms, they're all group endorsements of airplanes, so we don't necessarily have someone who can fly every aircraft that's on that register per se as an endorsement on their licence, but they are able to operate all those aircraft.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Just quickly follow up on that one. Could you just clarify in that answer then that the 2.3 million, was it, that was allocated was all for FOIs? And there was no other funding spent for other people in training within CASA?
Yes, we do have other funds expended on training overall, Senator. If you like, I can...
I'm happy to take that on notice. Don't need it
now.
now.
We'll take it on notice, Senator, and give you both a detailed reply on that.
I'd also be interested to know, do commercial organisations, whether they be airlines, charter operations or others, ever see it is in their interests to provide training, whether it be an endorsement training or currency or training for engineers on essentially a pro bono basis to help facilitate the oversight of their operations?
That is the practice overseas countries, Senator. That's true. Certainly jurisdictions to our north of here, the airline, if it was introducing an aircraft, it would be responsible for paying for the entire training for a number of flight operations inspectors, normally at least one, of we have none, but normally no more than two. And that's an ongoing commitment in that if the regulator decide to move the flight operations inspectors who are oversighting that aeroplane, then the organisation that you're oversighting would pay the cost of the conversion course for that flight operations inspector.
My question, I guess, does that occur in Australia? Has it occurred recently with any member of CASA?
I'll take it on notice, Senator, because I haven't checked everybody, but to my knowledge, the answer would be no, it has not occurred.
Sure.
But, as I say, I'll take that on notice if I could.
Sure. So any training, currency, endorsement for any member of CASA, that would be useful.
Well, we would share an element of the costs. I think that is the situation.
So through you, Chair, does that mean, given Mr Jordan's answer, that $2.3 million bucket of money for training, flight training for CASA, there might be some other funds available for training of CASA personnel, flight training?
Not necessarily flying training, there's other training monies available. For example, myself as an accountant to attend a training course. So there are more money than for 2.3 million.
You're talking more about the flying side of it,
The flying side of things.
So 2.3.
It's not a requirement of your job to have an endorsement on an A380 or anything like that to be CFO? No.
We'll give you a detailed breakdown, Senator, if we could, on notice, because I'm not sure of all the facts on
That's
that.
fine.
So how many people do you have endorsed on the A380, Mr McCall?
We have at least one, but stand by, Senator, if I could. Yes, it may only be 2, Senator. We'll take that on notice if we could find
Sure.
it.
Yeah, if you give us a list of their names, that'd be great.
We will.
Thank you. Chair, I have a couple of others if I could.